Well, good morning and welcome to everybody online, everybody listening to this message. This morning, my privilege to share with you eating from the wrong tree. Now, what we've done up until now was to look at the teaching on understanding the use of blood in the Bible. However, we have taken quite a long journey starting in Genesis. And if you study it with me, you will realize that we are speaking to some fundamental beliefs and foundational principles that we sometimes assume to be biblical about salvation. And of course, one such this morning is looking at the two trees and understanding what it is that we're supposed to see and how are we to be transformed by it. Because in reality, so many look at the trees, think that it leaves them with a judicial condemnation, and they don't go further, look into and understand what it is that the Lord wants to say to them, to each one of us individually, about the two trees. How does that apply to me? Am I left with the same choices? Am I confronted with free will to choose a mode of existence? And what is the danger of not seeing that? So as you could see, the title this morning, Eating from the Wrong Tree, in this context is not applying necessarily to unbelievers, but to those who call themselves by the name of Christ, who believe themselves to be Christian, and who are religious. So let's begin. Where we begin this morning is to just make that statement in broad strokes that people feel quite offended that two people in a garden transgressed and they are left with the judgment. And that particular approach, which is very judicial and traditional, and a misconception of what happened in the garden, leaves people without thinking, what does it really mean and how does that apply to me today? You see, the universal guilt condemnation model has led people to a misunderstanding, and that's what I hope to share with you this morning. Let us understand what it means and how does it apply practically to my life. You see, the Genesis narrative, folks, does not describe inherited legal consequence. What does it describe? It reveals the structure of human existence itself. How are we to relate to God? Now, I believe I went to enough effort to show you that those two trees are relational parameters. The one for the existence of man, and the one for the autonomy of God. And man is not to overreach and try and grab and lay hold of what belongs exclusively to God. In other words, although man is allowed in proximity to God, he is not allowed to strive to be like God, autonomous and self-determining, but he is supposed to live in a relationship of dependence upon God. That is the message that had to come through very clearly. In other words, that which pleases the Lord is total faith, total trust, total dependence on his character and intent and his purpose. He made us for himself. He knows best, and living in that dependent relationship leaves us with fulfillment and function. Now, we have to understand that this is exactly what those two trees stand for. Now, the temptation of the first man and woman unfolded in a garden, as we've explained, a temple, and there was real freedom. And the question you and I have to ask is, if that's the scenario, am I left also with real freedom? Or did man somehow lose his freedom to choose after that disobedience? The Bible doesn't indicate that at all. Man is a free moral agent, and therefore he is held accountable before the Lord. You cannot be held accountable for what you cannot choose, right? Now, let's just understand that that prohibition not to eat was not a dietary prohibition, but a test of relational posture. Is man willing to live in dependence on God? Is man willing to trust God? And folks, you can see already where we're going with this. We have to step out beyond the excuses and look into what the Bible's really teaching. As I've pointed out previously, if you read the Bible correctly, without glasses and eisegesis, you'll discover that the tree of life and the tree of knowledge were both made by God, and he did not declare the one bad and the other one good. He declared it all part of his good creation. If you observe further, you'll note that the Bible clearly states that that serpent who came into that garden to test and deceive was also a creature which God had made. And if we look at it in context, he made that creature, and on the day that he made the living beings, the creatures of the earth, he also declared them good. Now, it has implications, radical implications. It leaves man with a huge responsibility. Why? Because up until now, most people and most Christians I know here chose the exit of blaming the entrance of evil. Blame it on the serpent, blame it on the devil. However, if we analyze the scenario correctly, what do we see? We see relational boundaries, one for man, free access to God, constant dependence, constant participation in the life of God. The other one, autonomy, the authority to know right and wrong and to determine right and wrong, good and evil, belonged to God, and man was not to transgress that relational boundary, and that's the way he would function and fulfill his purpose. Now, the entry of the serpent was not the entry of evil as I explained in the previous session. The entry of evil was the entry of that assayer and tester to see whether man would remain faithful in his fidelity to the character and nature of God. Would he remain faithful? Would he remain trusting in the Lord? In other words, the Lord did not accept an explanation of it was the serpent. That was not accepted. And what does that mean to you and I? Man is a free moral agent. He needs to choose between two parameters. Is he going to live in dependence on the Lord and in him live and move and have his being? Or is he going to relationally separate himself from the Lord and live in a self-deterministic way and thus destroy himself? That's clearly what is shown to us here, without the excuse of claiming that it was the evil that came in that made him do it. It was evil that caused him to do a bad thing. No. The evil is in his own heart. The evil is turning away from God and towards self. And folks, this is exactly where I want to take you this morning, that you can see, as in the garden, as with the symbolism very clearly, we can see man is not given an opportunity of an excuse. God did not answer the appeal of the woman who claimed it was the serpent with, yes, you're right. He held them accountable. And they were exiled because of their own free choice. They chose a mode of living. And this is exactly what I want to show you, that we also do. We also are faced with the same choice. Listen to this. So the two trees therefore represents two modes of existence. The tree of life signifies life continually received from God. And guess what? The tree of knowledge is this attempt to grasp autonomy and moral authority for oneself. And we, of course, know what that does. The one makes truth universal, and the other one makes truth subjective, and then we redefine everything. And I want to show you how the same dynamic works from the garden right into the church today, where we are sitting with people who are not transformed but informed, because what they have done is they have reduced the gospel of Jesus Christ and the message of salvation and the centrality of the cross into a formula, a structure, and a piece of self-effort. And they do that without seeing. So we need to see, folks, there is something so critical that we need to understand here. It's a choice. And if I can't see that the critical choice is between autonomy, self-determination, self-justification, self-effort, or trust in the Lord, then I will never see if I can't see that. Okay? So, let's go further. Adam's act, therefore, is archetypal, typal or archetypal. Typical. Well, it works, okay? I've got my Afrikaans brain on, guys. Just as Adam exercised real freedom, every human being stands within the same existential space of choice. That's what it boils down to. What do you choose? Do you know man is still a free moral agent? Choose you this day whom you will serve. Okay? It's the choice. It's the same choice that comes right there from the garden. Will I transgress the boundary, declare my own independence from God, and function in a religious way? And that's what we're going to drill into just shortly. So each person exercises free will in choosing a mode of existence, either life received or life grasped for oneself. Okay? And so in this context, the garden narrative describes the enduring human condition. What you and I need to grasp today, folks, is not that man somehow inherits a judgment and a guilt and deserves to be killed from the day he's born, but something dramatic took place in this garden where man had to choose a mode of living. He was either going to live by faith and trust in God, or he was going to live by virtue of his own strength. Do you see in context that when we now go to the New Testament, one of the main things that Jesus Christ taught was to live by faith, to live by trust in him, to come to an end, to come to a cross. That's a death to self and a life to God. It's exactly what was set before man in the garden. If the problem is man turning away from God and towards himself, grasping what belongs to God only, trying to be autonomous and self-determining, then the answer is man has to be dealt a death blow in that self-centeredness and turn back to dependence on God. It's still the same choice. It's still the same choice. There's no serpent you can blame. There's no other person you can blame. You can't blame God. And you can't cover up. And we're going to look at that this morning, because unfortunately, standing on the exile side of the equation, man is again given an opportunity to come back in. But he has certain self-centered orientations that cause him to constantly want to choose self-preservation. And that's what we're going to have a look at. You see, the story of the two trees remains a present reality. It's not just something historical that happened to somebody in a garden. They speak clearly of every modern day person's choice. Are you going to turn to the Lord and trust the Lord in all your ways and lean not on your own understanding? Or are you going to depend on yourself, drive the bus and roll it? Okay? So it's consequently choosing a mode of existence, and choosing that under pressure of testing, trial and temptation. That assayer, that tester is still there. We are still challenged with the choice. What am I going to do? Am I going to trust in the arm of the flesh, or am I going to trust in the Lord and flourish in His presence? So what I need to make very clear, folks, in Romans 5:12, the Bible teaches, therefore sin came into the world through one man, and death as a result of sin. What is it laying down? A principle where there is this sin, which was what? Eating from the wrong tree. Death followed as a consequence, but the man chose it, and exile from the presence of God, and eventually physical death was the consequence. Now death first, as I explained it, there was a separation between him and God, and then later he suffered 900 years plus later physical death as well. So there's a principle, sin and death. So in the same manner, death spread to all men. Why? Because they were born under judgment? No. Because all men sinned. As in the same manner as Adam made a choice, people, his posterity after him, chooses, and inevitably they will eat that fruit of their choice. They will eat the consequence of that fruit. And so it's a very simple principle. We are left with a choice. Man didn't lose his free will after that transgression. Oh yes, it might now be more influenced to be more perverted and self-centered, but man still chooses. Now, we go to the concept of the trees that God placed there again as relational boundaries, as choosing autonomy or dependence by faith. And then we see transgression and the first consequence of man separated from God. And I want you to give clear attention to this. And I've explained it a little bit in the past, but today we're going to really drill into it. Because this is so important to measure ourselves, to see how do we react to that choice. What do we do? You see, separated from God, man did a few things. Conscious of his nakedness, he did a few things. Well, his eyes were opened and they were not morally opened, okay? It wasn't the fact that he suddenly realized he was naked. It was the fact that he suddenly realized that his shame before God, his head dropped. He lost his freedom of access. He lost the intimate relationship. His head had to bow. He had to turn away. He can't look God in the eye. Okay, if I can say it in human terms. And the first thing they did, they sewed fig leaves. Now, folks, what I want you to see is that we have a natural tendency to do certain things that preserves self, that causes us to constantly eat from the tree of knowledge. Just like Adam did. We separate God from the truth. We separate relationship from the truth. And then we construct for ourselves a formula and a religion. And there's the problem. We self-preserve and we operate in the mind of the flesh, which is sense and reason, and the truth never reaches the heart. And guess what we do? We focus on the tree of knowledge. Oh, the way to grow spiritually is to know more, is to study more, is to study all the topics I possibly can. No, all you become is an informed sinner. Doesn't change the heart, because on the inside there is self-preservation, there is fig leaf theology. So that's the one thing. They covered themselves. Number two, they hid themselves. And we're going to look a little bit around what that means and what do people do in their hide tactic. You can't hide from God, but people do certain things to escape the reality of their nakedness before the Lord, of their loss of intimacy and the shame that comes with it. So the next thing is, the man said it's the woman. The woman said it's the serpent. And the man also said, it's God. You know, if you didn't make this woman, I wouldn't be in this fix. The husband said it's the wife. The wife says it's the husband. And the husband said it's God and the wife. Do you see what I'm saying? So man has developed a tactic that preserves himself and that necessarily brings him to the tree of knowledge all the time. If self cannot be exposed, I can tell you, you'll serve the Lord for 30 or 40 years with all the physical zeal you can muster, with all the faithful works you can ever do. Yet you as a person remain unchanged and hard and critical, judgmental and self-righteous. And all of these things don't expose self, they just masquerade as true spirituality and they cover self. It's a problem that stems right back there from the garden. So look at it with me, please. Because what we want to do today is to understand from the context, what is it that we do? We are still faced with the same 2-3 choices. Why is it that we keep on eating from the wrong tree? Well, at the heart of it is man finds himself first and foremost in a state of separation. But he has a choice whether he's going to come near or whether he's going to self-function, be autonomous in his own mind. But in order to come into a state of dependence, self has to be confronted. Self has to be exposed. Self has to be exposed as what is at the root of man's sin and evil. Let's look at it. So the first thing I want to lay down for you is the way we think. And now think about this, folks. Apply it to yourself as you sit there, wherever you are. Because we all follow the same pattern so that we keep on eating from the tree of knowledge. And how amazing to think today that you can actually sit slap bang in the middle of a building with a cross on it and listen to some talking head informing the brain and yet remain unchanged and then walk out thinking that you're right with God. You see, self with a religious garment is the most dangerous thing there is. Not outright sin, religious selfishness. That's the danger, because we just can't see what's wrong with it. Okay? Now, to get into eating from the wrong tree, there's a process that we can clearly see in the garden. Is it true that God has said it comes with an unspoken bunch of challenges and questions in the mind of the receiver? So first, in order to judge what was said, that truthful dependence must be loosened. You see, there's a tree of life. I trust, I believe, I follow him, I do his will. But now I get challenged. Is it true that God has said? Will he sustain me? Will he provide? Will he meet all my needs? Or do I need to grab a few here and there for myself? God helps those who help themselves, right? Okay, so maybe I need to look after myself here. But what is it then? Is it self-preservation or trusting the Lord? How many of you have ever grappled with that inner conflict of, oh, should I now yield, let the cross do its work? Should I give up the right to what I want and wait on the Lord to fulfill it? Well, you see, the problem in the garden was not that they had desire, but that there was a test to unlawfully fulfill desire. God would meet their needs, but they were pressured to meet it themselves. Okay? And so we see, in order to get into that space of doing your own thing, or as it was said by Crowley, etc., do as thou wilt is the whole of the law. To get to that place of doing what you want, your mind must first change towards God. So before you get a physical transgression, you have a mental breach, a relational breach. Let's look at it. Okay? So trustful dependence is loosened. You've got to step outside of that posture of relational trust. You see, what is at the heart of faith? Faith is trust in the character of a person. What is at the heart of that testing in the garden? Is it true that God has said? It's an attack on his character. It's the same thing you go through today. Can I actually trust God? You see, for most people, God is dead because they don't really trust him. They've got their one foot firmly on the ground and the other one, okay, I surrender. It won't work. Because at the heart of this whole transgression of eating from that tree is a mindset that changes first. Then, second, in order to judge what God has said, you've got to loosen yourself and then elevate yourself as the judge to judge God. So suddenly a relational change takes place. What happens is, I'm not dependent on him anymore. I'll judge him. And in order to be somebody's judge, you've got to set yourself up over and above them. So the human stands over God. He's not trusting God anymore and look up to him. The creature assumes the role of judge. Okay? This reverses the proper order of the relationship. Folks, can you see what the Lord said to us? To Adam and Eve, but to us in modern day. There are two trees. The one, you help yourself. The other one, don't touch. You can come in proximity to it, but you cannot participate in it. Okay? The one is autonomy, the determiner of knowledge of good and evil, right and wrong, and it belongs to God and not to man. Now, you overreach and try to grab for yourself what is reserved for God only, the relationship breaks down. Okay? And this is exactly what happens here. First, is it true that God has said? So man must break free from that state of dependence, which is the tree of life. Then he has to elevate himself to become the judge. And the moment he does that, that relationship of dependence is broken. Then, third, the new standard of judgment must be determined. How is man going to judge the word of God? How is he going to judge what God has said? Well, he's going to use the suggestion of the serpent. No, look, man, you'll be like God, you'll gain a true knowledge, and you'll surely not die. So he's got to use another standard. So he's either going to use the mind of the flesh, which is sense and reason, or he's going to use the external judgment. And this is exactly what we see in modern society. And this is exactly what you experience in your own life. First, you separate yourself from that trust and dependence because you really, really, really feel the urge to do something to appease your flesh. Then you take the word that's prohibitive but protective, and you see it as something that's robbing you. It's restrictive now. It's taking something away from me. And then you use that as a judge to determine for yourself, well, I don't think God really meant that, and I just can't see why he's doing that, because it's obviously not that bad. I mean, everybody's doing it. Most Christians I know are doing it, so why don't I have a wee bite? And that's exactly what happens. So man now uses a new standard, and that new standard resides in his brain, resides in his own thinking and his own feelings and his own passions. And suddenly the trust, the dependence is completely destroyed. Folks, can you see what I'm showing you? What are we supposed to learn from the garden? You're either going to live by faith or you die. You're either going to trust God or you're going to trust yourself. There are really not a lot of options. Look, what you need to think about. So many people misinterpret the picture in the garden. The serpent didn't walk in there or whatever, came down from a branch and said, listen, worship me. The temptation was never to worship him. The temptation was always to have to turn away from God and towards self by relational overreach to self be like God. Have you ever thought about that? There's no thing with horns asking for worship. There's a test for man to declare himself independent of God and equal with God, and that's his demise. The creature who is dependent on God as his source of life turns away freely from that source of life, thinking that he can be a source on his own. Now, fourth, so this shift necessarily involves doubt in the character of God. So there's this whole, the moment you doubt God's character, the moment you become the judge of God's good intention, guess what? You're now God's judge, but you have to be independent of God, and there can be no faith. Isn't it interesting to you folks that even to this day, you have the same test and trial? You know, if you want to scatter the sheep, you just slander the messenger. We can't trust him. What if he's so dark and this and that is true? Well, you've fallen for the oldest trick in the book. It's been the trick from the beginning. Doubt in the character somehow corrupts the belief in the message. Doubt in the character of God makes people doubt his word. Because he is his word. And so what do people do? In line with the serpent, they still hiss the same way. Okay? So now, what you need to understand, the fall is fundamentally relational before it's behavioral. What we see here is the breakdown of man's trusting dependence on God. It is a movement from trusting dependence to autonomous self-evaluation, from receiving truth to constructing truth. Folks, you have to see it. That's what transpired there. It was not a physical prohibition and a dietary prohibition. It clearly was within a temple, defining relational boundaries. You can come close to God, but you can never be like God. You honor him and you stay dependent on him. Now, can you see that we're called to make the same choice? But can you see that most of us have the same mindset? Because that same tester, assayer, and serpent has maybe slithered his way into your own mind. Is it true that you can trust God? Can I actually surrender? Can I trust him if I give up my grip on my life and my control and my driver's seat? Can I actually trust him? And most people's answer is, I don't think so. He didn't come through for me when I wanted my way. So guess what? I'll just stay in the seat. Well, the road is a dead end that you're driving on. And so we need to realize that. It's a very subtle way of thinking that is natural to the posterity of Adam. It's self-preserving, and it is self-justifying, and it's self-protecting. Wasn't me, it's the woman, it's the serpent. And by the way, I can fix this relational breach through the effort of making my own garment and covering my own spiritual shame. Shame, man, we're going to see that it won't work today. Okay? So the same dynamic remains at work in every human departure from God. Sin begins not merely with an action, but with a relational shift. Can you see, folks, why Christianity is not a religion, it's a relationship? We come to the Lord. We enter into a relationship. He calls us children. He calls those who believe bride. He relates intimately with them. Okay? And what you need to see, he draws us back into that place of trusting him, depending on him. I might not understand, but I know who I trust. You see, a lot of times, folks, you want to reason it out with the mind of the flesh, and the Lord doesn't want to give you a reason, because then you're back into that old tree. So understanding can wait, but yielding and trusting cannot. Okay? I don't trust because I understand. I trust because I know who I'm trusting in. Because a lot of times I don't understand. I just go by the prompting of the Spirit and the leading of the Word, and I trust, and it works. Okay? But you have to get there, and you have to see the impediments in the way that stops you from eating from the right tree and entering relationship. Now, Please listen to the following. This now becomes very important. So where personal recognition of our own self-righteousness, self-deception is lacking, truth is not denied outright. It's not denied. What happens? Well, it's just redirected. It's reconstructed. Those who are now in this mode of self, which is exactly what Adam and Eve did, wasn't me. I'll fix it myself. I'll just hide away so you can't see it, God. It's the other people. And God, it's you. You brought this upon my life. Since you, God, you're part of the cause of this. And it's the devil. You see the birth of the deliverance ministry right there. Now we can blame the serpent. Okay, I can't help it. The serpent made me do it type of thing. Nope. It's not going to work. But what do we see? We see with this as a background, as a mental approach to self-preservation, what do we see? Truth is not denied. It's just redirected. The very word that comes to expose and transforms is externalized, systemized, and converted into something manageable. Now we have the birth of religion. You see, that fig leaf apron is the birth of religion. It's the same thing that you and I need to see. And I keep on eating from the wrong tree as long as I do this. As long as I try and work my own righteousness. As long as I try and cover the shame of relational brokenness with my own effort. May God help you to see it in your own lives. There is the greatest resistance against seeing this. And so many people are sweating away in the pew. Okay? So things become externalized and systemized, and it becomes a religious structure. And it sounds so good. You see, I always say to people, listen, just because you go into the bakery every day, maybe you work there. Just because you work in the bakery doesn't make you a bread. If you might not be privileged and you sleep in the garage, doesn't make you a car. You can spend your life in church, doesn't make you a Christian. It might make you an informed sinner at best. It might transform your behavior by self-effort, but it will not transform your heart if you cannot see that you constantly externalize truth, that you use it as a formula. Okay? It has become a self-help exercise. The church is saturated with people. 5 easy steps how to deal with your sin. What does that sound like? Tree of knowledge, okay? You're looking for a formula. Phone a friend to join a little self-help group. All these formulas, it's self-help. Just the question, how many of you in the past who wrestled with an obstacle of sin and personal weakness found the solution by running to another person with the same problem? Really? And so we see the church is saturated with self-help. And they don't see, but what you're doing is you're eating from the wrong tree. People want quick fix formulas. Do you know what happens with quick fix formulas? It doesn't work. All you're acquiring is more knowledge that will frustrate you more, and all you're doing is you're sweating harder, and it doesn't help. And so living truth becomes formula. Grace becomes self-effort. Repentance becomes formula and emotion. 5 easy signs of true repentance. It's reduced to a formula. Oh, I had the feeling. I really cried. Yeah, did you cry because you got caught out, or did you cry because you grieved God? I'm just asking. Holiness becomes self-righteousness. You see, now I do things for the Lord. I have excellent zeal. Look, I've been faithful for years. Look at how much I've done. I've done this, I've done that. What is it, folks? It's the same self-preservation. It's externalizing something. Listen, you know what they say about something that doesn't make the change? You know, over time, you have something that fossilizes, it never makes the change. And so you get fossilized Christians. They're still in the old man, fossilized in it, but they've got an outer garment of religiosity. They never changed. Okay? So, what happens is repentance is not a living reality. It's not a turning from the old man through a cross towards God. What is it? It's a formula. It's an emotion. Everything gets reduced. And it collapses into self-trust. You see, now I rely on what I've experienced. Next thing, further. Tears substitute for transformation. Emotional catharsis substitute for inward reorientation. And one feels cleansed without having been confronted. See how easy it is, folks? The heart is so deceitful. Folks, you've got to look at this with me prayerfully. There were two trees in the garden. They represent two modes of living which we are free to choose. But because there is the same tendency of Adam that was in the garden to deny, to hide, to cover oneself with self-effort, to blame others, to blame God, and to blame even the serpent. Because there's this self-preservation mode, we have to ask the Lord, Lord, help me to see. Because I can't carry on being a religious bigot. It's going to destroy our lives if we can't see. Lord, please, like you said in the beginning, let there be light. Then show forth the light of your righteousness in my life. No more excuses. Okay? Then, in this case where it's self-driven, repentance becomes cyclical. One confesses behavior while quietly preserving the deeper architecture of self. It's easy to say, yeah, I'm sorry, I did this, I did that, but you never change. You keep on eating from the same tree. You keep on manifesting the same fruit. And folks, this might now become a little bit clearer to you. How do you know you're eating from the wrong tree? You see, Jesus said, these people serve me with their lips while their hearts are far from me. And then another thing, you know people by fruit. Now, I know some can pop a fruit with a lot of self-effort. At least it looks like fruit. It's plastic, but they've made it. It looks like the real thing. But here's the thing, folks. You are what you are when you're alone. I mean, you can fool a lot of people. You can never fool yourself, you know. You know that the heart is not honest. You know that what you produce is self-deceiving. And you know what is so interesting? One of the characteristics of a person eating from the wrong tree is that they fear exposure of self more than they fear exposure of a particular sin. Because it's going to expose their whole facade, their whole hypocrisy. Fruit, motive. These things are essential to understand, but where are we really? And so everything becomes this externalized religion. Effort replaces yielding. Activity replaces surrender. And more effort invested, the more ego feels justified. The more you do for Jesus, okay, the more spiritual you are. I met some people in the past who said to me, I want to learn and know everything. Teach me. Well, that's wonderful ambition, but what you are actually saying to me, you want information, not transformation, because this is not something you learn. You walk in the truth. It's applied. You conduct yourself according to the truth you know, and the Spirit works within you, and you grow slow. Having intellectual understanding of something means nothing. We know in life how it works, but we don't grasp it in the spiritual. In life, somebody can study however long to become a pilot. Does it make him a pilot? Man, he at least has to fly the thing. You can have all the theory. It doesn't mean you're going to keep the thing afloat, okay? But we don't understand that spiritually. We think knowledge equals relationship. You see, it's the same principle that Adam practiced in the garden. Adam, by virtue of his response, thought that he could restore the shame without restoring the relationship. He thought he could acquire the knowledge without the relationship. He thought he could maintain life without relationship. You see what I'm heading towards? That's the problem. We need to understand Christianity is not a religion, it's a relationship. It was the initial choice in the garden, it's still your choice. But you have to be aware of the impediment. You have to be aware that just like Adam, we still apply the same excuses. Okay? So the most sobering reality is that the self is rarely removed. It doesn't like a cross. It loves the shadows. It loves the shadows of Christianity and the good principles, and it loves to produce some in its own strength. But to be an owner of it, it has to yield to the truth. It talks about truth that doesn't yield to it. And since it does that, self can remain intact and respectable with a garment of religion. Okay? So, it is ensconced in a guise of godliness. It learns the vocabulary of humility. It masters theological precision. It defends orthodoxy, yet it remains fundamentally unexamined. It's so amazing how we all are. You can see very well the shortcomings of other people. But when last did you see the beam in your own eye? It's quite difficult. I guess that beam is so much in the way we can't see, right? And so, religious self-righteousness, I need you to understand, religious self-righteousness, the whole charade, can coexist with religious zeal. Just because you have zeal doesn't mean nothing. You can be sincere, but sincerely long. You understand? The outer structure is impressive, but inward there is nothing. And so we need to look at this quickly, folks. What are we saying to each other? We're saying that man is a priest. Man functions in the relationship with God and towards God. A dependent relationship, a trusting relationship, a relationship of faith. There were relational boundaries. Although man can come in the proximity of God, can come near to God, have relationship with God, he can never be like God. And that's exactly what those trees stood for. Is man willing to live and move and have his being in God and trust God because all were out of him, through him, and to him? Or is man going to try and function independent of God? Is he going to make everything subject to himself? Is he from that point forward going to have subjective knowledge, subjective experience, and that becomes his reality? And we know that's the demise of modern man. Subjective truth. What's true for you is not necessarily true for me. Okay? And there goes society. Anyway, what do we see? It's still the same choice. And we are saying that just like Adam, there were certain ways of thinking that broke that relational dependence, got man to become God's judge, got man to use his own intellect or the suggestions of the outside serpent to measure God, his character and his intention, and got man eventually to think that he can have life without relationship, that he can have knowledge and purpose and meaning in this physical life without relationship and dependence on God. So really, folks, the choice man is confronted with is to live by faith or to live by his own flesh. And it's still the same choice that you and I have. But now let me show you. Let us just pin the self down and hit him in the kush. Okay? So, the self can change behavior without dying. That's the first jinx of the curveball. Okay? In other words, it can stop obvious sin, and it can learn correct theology, it can practice discipline, speak spiritual language, and serve tirelessly. Okay, now I did read through that quickly because I didn't realize how many slides I prepared, and I'm thinking that this might spill over into a next session. But these things are so important because, yep, there we have it. Religious frickie. Doing what? Change the behavior without dying. You see, folks, what is at the heart of the problem of the tree of knowledge? It's an overreach. It's a counting of self. And the only way to get that self to an end is not going to give it up willingly. It's worse than extracting a wisdom tooth. It sits very deep and very hard. The only way for it is for the Lord to work the way of the cross in it and bring it to an end. Okay? But it can preserve itself. As a matter of fact, self will offer self-crucifixion to preserve self. No, I'll give that up. I'll give that up. Oh no, yippee, I did it myself. Now you're back to square self. None of these require the self to surrender its throne. Do you know, I knew a theologian that confessed, he was a professor in theology, confessed he didn't know the Lord. I think academia is full with intellectual, informed atheists. So be religion, folks, and this is where I'm driving to. You can sit there today in church, and I say to you from the beginning, this is who we're speaking to today. Religion becomes the safest hiding place for self because outward change creates the illusion of inward death. Hey, look at me, I've changed. Have you ever seen these guys? And then you get an even worse tactic. You threaten them with eternal torture. And they're so afraid, their motive is fear. They change as long as the flame is near. And the moment you take it away, they slip away. Okay? So that's religion. That's an outward form that it appears to be somebody that's really dead. So religion gives the self a noble mask. You know, I have a friend who said to me, look man, I've been in the church for 30 years and I don't want nothing to do with Christians. And you know what? He's not the only one that has that viewpoint. And you could ask him, but why are you saying that? They're the worst people ever. They have the Bible in the front and a pickaxe in the back. Okay? You know, the moment they throw you the Bible, they're ready to stab you when you drop your guard. Isn't that exactly it? It gives a noble mask. Oh, this person is so good, this person is all right, and then guess what happens on the back end? There's no personal insight, there's no transformation. Guess what? The self becomes morally decorated instead of crucified. Do you see that? We have here in our country people who were previously called terrorists that are now generals. It's the same thing. You get decorated instead of confronted for the truth. It's the same principle. We see it in the world, we see it in the church. Self becomes morally decorated. Now, the self thrives on spiritual performance. So guess what? It doesn't need to die. It just puts in a little bit more effort and it looks very well refined, right? So it loves the system where worth can be measured. It's controllable. It's measurable. Oh, look, I'm good. But you're still eating from the same tree. You still choose your own knowledge, your own insight, your own self-reliance. You still blame others. You still blame the serpent. You still blame God. Now, what I've highlighted for you at the onset today was that serpent was never called evil, nor was the tree of knowledge of good and evil called evil. It wasn't called evil. God never declared it a bad thing. But what was evil? What was evil was man's free will exercise to depart from dependence on God and choose autonomy and self-reliance and subjective truth, determining for himself right and wrong. And of course you can see why that would be evil, because he would now make everything subject to his own passions and lusts, and if it suits his lusts, he would call it good. And if it opposes his lusts, he would call it evil. So completely redefined. Okay? And so, what do we see further? This self avoids the cross by substituting effort. Avoids the cross by substituting effort. Loss of control, loss of importance, and loss of self-justification is at the heart of the cross. It's the one thing that self doesn't like. Why do you think it's no coincidence when you go to the majority of churches today, you don't find Jesus Christ and the cross central? You find self-help. How to be a happy Christian. 5 easy steps how to please this. 5 easy steps how to get God to give you what you want. Excuse me, it sounds very much like the gospel of the serpent. You can be a little God. You can get what you want. Life is about you. Or God just wants you to enjoy everyday life. Really? It's not what the Bible teaches. That is enamoring self with religious language and therefore confusing the person about what the gospel really is. You got to understand that the only way away from that tree of knowledge, which is autonomous self-exertion, is a cross. You can't upgrade that thing because self will take pride. You've got to bring it to the end of itself. And the Lord does that work. You've got to be willing. Again, God's not asking your willpower because that's self again. He's asking your willingness to yield and He will do the work. He's asking your willingness to say, Lord, I hear this foolish man. Open my eyes. Let me see. Speak light to the chaos and confusion in my life. And He will do that. There is no formula. There's no self-help trick. There's no 5 easy steps. There's only Jesus and the cross. And as long as I fool around with other things and don't come into that dependent relationship, nothing will work. There's no quick fix, guys. Okay. Now, going further, where are we with time? Okay, we almost finished for today. I'll carry on with this in the next round number 2. Okay? So self hides behind knowledge. You know, like we read in the book of Romans, I testify of them that have a certain zeal for God without correct knowledge. Oh, very zealous. But again, what's the origin of that zeal? Self. Okay. See, a person can understand grace, teach humility, and explain surrender, but not be one of them in reality. Ouch. So self hides in concepts about truth instead of yielding to truth. Man, listen. So many people want to understand everything. People want to have higher spiritual revelations, but they are disobedient to minor truths. Okay? Only conduct your lives according to the truth you already know, because if you just acquire knowledge and build on it, what does it do? Well, self hides behind knowledge. It talks about things, but it doesn't live it. Okay? So self uses service as camouflage. Look at everything I do for the Lord. Look, I give so much. Look, I serve so much. Look, I reach out so much. Okay? It feels very important when it participates in something where they feel value. Oh, I'm needed, so I'm so important. Ooh, see, I have a function. Self is very deceiving. Let me explain something to you, folks. Self will destroy self to please self. That's how dangerous self is. Okay, and so what do we see? Well, self wants to feel needed. So they will participate where they feel needed because it makes self feel spiritual. Self will do things to gain recognition as being spiritual. Self will seek ways to avoid inner surrender and just look good. Self will always project the wrongs on other people, okay? And it will do things as a means of control. It does, it gives, it participates where it can control, okay? outward giving can coexist with inward self-preservation. So self is preserved. Like I met a man a few years ago who said to me, look, I've got a deal with God. Oh, wow, I didn't know you can do deals with God. He said, look, I don't need to go to church. I do go to the pub now and then, but I give amply to the ministry. So I have a deal. I can go to the pub, not participate in church, so God's violating his own word, but in exchange for that, I'm doing something good. And he sits there very self-righteously. He's made a deal with God. Now, I didn't know you can make deals with God, and I don't think that deal will last the test of time. Okay? Because outward giving now coexists with inward self-preservation. Bottom line. Do you see how dangerous this thing is, guys? What am I showing you? We are just at stage 1. Adam and his wife knew they were naked. What's the first thing they did? Becoming aware of the fact that they lost relational proximity to God and that something happened to them, they fell into self-effort. I can fix this without restoration of relationship. I did it. I call it the Sinatra religion. I did it my way. Okay? So religion becomes the fortress to protect self-image. Have you ever seen that? You know, where I come from, you know, the traditional churches in our country, the guy walks up on a podium, looks down on the congregation from a dizzy height, as if he's God, and then he speaks some stuff that people don't understand, and they just go amen just because it's religion. Okay? And so we see that it becomes a fortress that feeds self-life. Oh, I come from a family of missionaries. Well, good for you. I've been in church since I was a baby. Do you know how much I've done for the Lord? Do you know how much zeal I have? Do you know how many notes of sermons I make? Do you know I've got packs and files and libraries of notes? Do you know you've never changed? Do you see what you're looking for? You're eating from the wrong tree. You see, the truth, while resisting the spirit of truth that takes it to the heart of self, ceases to be the truth, man. It becomes mere knowledge and it will kill you. Can you see what those two trees stood for? All the things about God only make sense in relationship and dependence on God. Otherwise, I distance myself from God and I have constructs of God. I have philosophies of God, like new Platonic views of God where I construct an impassible, immovable, unchanging, transcendent Calvinist God out of philosophy. It's the mind of the flesh. It's not relational. And that's what the fallen mind does. It constructs things. And then it thinks itself very pious because it's worshipping the idol of its mind. And cannot see they're eating from the tree of knowledge. The self is most dangerous when it hides in religious garments, because then there is no perceived need for the cross. You know what is so important, folks? I've seen it in Christian circles. I've been in ministry since 1989. You know what I see? Instead of asking, are you spirit-filled? Are you anointed of God? Are you called to the ministry you're in? What qualifications do you have? And then the response is like Paul said, do we need recommendation letters? Here are letters written in your hearts by what? The truth and the spirit. It's there. That's the thing people need to look for. But eating from the wrong tree, what are they looking for? What qualification do you have to inform my very intellectual mind? And so, folks, let me just stop there for today. There are things we need to consider. Those trees stood for something very particular. They are still the same two trees. It's not something historical in the garden. It means something specific. And it means something to you and I specific. We still have the same choice. We are still confronted with the same self-deceptive reaction to truth. The choice is, Can I live in trust and reliance and relationship? Or am I going to function autonomously even when I'm religious? Oh, I say I trust God, but I'm very strong in my own opinions. Okay? I'm very strong in what I believe, and you better bow to what I believe, because that and that alone is the truth, because I say so. Okay? Am I going to live that way and preserve myself, or am I going to have a come to Jesus moment where I come to him yielding willingly, letting him do in my life what he wants to do, letting him expose me and bring me to nothing, and let the cross have its perfect way in me? He's not asking for my willpower, he's asking for my willingness. He's asking me to be willing. Lord, one thing do for me. Let me see. What is it that you want me to do? That I might see, Lord. And not see, oh, I see people looking like trees. And then it's not good enough yet. I want to see clearly. And you don't stop. And the Lord will deal with you. Because self-help's not going to help you. 5 easy steps is not going to help you. There is no quick fix. The only fix is the cross and relationship. And if you sit stuck in a place that has never brought you change, and you sit with the same patterns and the same habits, and I'm saying that to you, the heart of man is very deceitful. It has all these self-preservation tactics, and maybe it's time that you stand before the Lord and say, okay, Lord, maybe I know nothing about you. Maybe I don't know you in spirit and truth. I know I have a lot of knowledge and constructs, but that means nothing unless I'm changed. And so we need to cry out to the Lord, because the most dangerous place for self to hide is in religion. It's a garment, because there is no perceived need for the cross. I pray the Lord help each one of us. We need to see people whose lives are changed by Jesus Christ, who live in true dependence. And then we'll see the kingdom come, and we'll see societies change. Up until then, we'll see everybody huddling up in their own little corners of knowledge, claiming to be the elect of God, but not impacting society. Well, trying to impact society with fear and enforced rules instead of the relationship that they need to have with Jesus Christ. Amen.